Hello everyone and welcome to the Telespazio Express Talks, a 15 to 20 minute talk with leading figures from the new space sector, where we will talk about technology and sustainability. Welcome and enjoy the Telespazio Express Talks.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Telespazio Express Talks, our podcast on sustainability and space technology. Today, we have Alessandro Balossino from ARGOTEC visiting our virtual podcast studio. Alessandro, ciao, welcome.
Hi, ciao, good to see you.
Good to see you too. So thank you very much for joining us today in the first place. We're very happy to have you with us. We wanted to start our chat today by asking you a very important question. So who is Alessandro Balossino? Please tell us, where do you come from and where does your interest in space lie?
Well, actually, that's a very good question. I wish I knew who I am. But in general, I'm like a regular guy that grew up in a middle class family in northern Italy. I've always been good at science and math, and at some point, I decided to study engineering here in Torino. And I was into robotics, and so I was studying mechatronics. And at some point, I had the opportunity of doing an internship at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena. And so I went there and I saw all these cool robots that were meant to explore Mars and all the solar system. And it was love at first sight. And I realized that that's what I wanted to do in my life. So I've been doing this for 10 years now. And well, aside of that, I'm just a curious guy that likes to explore and do and learn new things, I would say. Yeah.
So by the sound of it, this is a very vocational passion, right? So you went to work in the US and then you found your passion there. You came back to Europe and you joined ARGOTEC. Why ARGOTEC? Why did you decide to go for this company over all the possibilities you had when you joined them at the time?
5 years ago, I wanted a new challenge and I was looking for a new job. And before this company, I used to work in another company that makes like a descent system, parachutes, airbags for space applications. So it was quite cool. But I wanted to change, and I applied pretty much everywhere in the world. And there were very few companies here in Italy that I was looking to, and one of these companies was Argotec, because they were doing some stuff that was crazy enough for me. And also in terms of dimension of the company, it was around 50, 60 people back then. And it was also the sort of dimension that I thought that was the right one for me, so that I could give my contribution and see my contribution on a daily basis. And so that's why I applied. And yeah, it went well. I got hired.
So you mentioned a bit of the crazy word. You felt like ARGOTEC was crazy enough for you, kind of thing. So we will get into some of the really exciting and crazy missions that you guys have worked on just in a minute. But I wanted to touch on another point related to ARGOTEC first, which is I know you guys pride yourselves of having the most innovative, reliable, and sustainable company in new space. So can you develop a little bit of that?
Yeah, that's part of the vision of the company. So whenever we work on something new, on a new technology or a new product or a new mission, these are the three pillars we need to take into account. And this is particularly important in my role, because as head of the research and development unit, I really have to look into the future and develop new stuff. And so whenever I'm end up on the technology I want to spend my time and my effort on, I have to keep in mind these three pillars that is basically our vision for the future of space, and that's how we want to differentiate for the rest of the market. So whenever I see something that is very innovative, or when there is something that I believe that can help us to build a more sustainable future for space exploitation and exploration, that's the direction I should go in.
Fantastic. So you've mentioned innovation, reliability, and sustainability. But focusing a bit more on sustainability, which is the topic of our podcast. So how does Argotec support sustainability, particularly on your area, right? On research and the development of the products that you guys put out there?
Well, I would say there are many things that can be done in this field. First, in general, we are working on Earth observation program, so the IRIDE program, which is funded by the Italian government, and that's by definition something that is related to sustainability because having a complex infrastructure that helps us to observe and better understand the Earth is something that can help us to be more sustainable and to gather valuable data to act and to do the right thing to in order to mitigate climate change and to move like in the right direction. On the other hand, when it comes to space, there are many things we could do. The first one is stop doing more and more space debris, which is something that is going to become more and more important. And also having space assets that are meant to last for a long time and not just stay in orbit for a couple of years and then be replaced by new assets. So I think that we all need to switch a bit our mentality because right now there isn't much focus on having a very long-term perspective. We are just caring about here and now, and we are launching pretty much anything that we believe that is worth launching without taking too much into account the long-term effects of what we're doing now.
Fantastic. I mean, to me, all three keywords that you mentioned are related to each other and kind of supporting each other, right? Because when you develop reliable products, then by definition, they become sustainable because if they don't fail in space, you're not generating any more space garbage. And at the same time, you need to put a good portion of innovation in all of this so that these products are reliable and sustainable at the same time. So everything is interlinked at the end of the day. Let's go a bit more into the so-called crazy stuff that Argotec has been doing in the past few years, because I'm personally a huge fan of one of the missions you guys have done, the DART mission. And I would like you to explain a little bit to the audience what that mission was about and what was innovative, which Argotec did in this in their contribution to this mission.
Yeah, so the DART mission was a mission led by NASA, and it was the first planetary defense mission, which means there was this spacecraft whose goal was to deviate an asteroid so that we can test this sort of a kinetic technique to deviate an asteroid in case it's a threat for the Earth. And Argotec gave this contribution, which is called LiCioCube. That is a program that was promoted by the Italian Space Agency. And so the idea was to have a space reporter that could witness the mission because the DART spacecraft was basically smashed on the asteroid in order to deviate it. And so obviously it got destroyed. And since the impact was very far away from the Earth, something around 10, 11 million kilometers, it was very hard to see from here. And so we had this very little spacecraft, a 6U CubeSat that was there and in full autonomy took more than 600 pictures of the impact. And that helped the science community to gather valuable data on the dynamics of the impact. And so we have these images that are very useful for understanding what happened. And also from a technological point of view, we had this very, very small spacecraft, around 15 kilos, that was very far from Earth, that performed in full autonomy a high-speed flyby. So also from the technical perspective, it was, very cool to see that with very little money, you can provide additional value to a flagship mission with a very small contribution. So it's, I think the concept is really cool, in my opinion.
I think I share the same opinion. I think it's a really, really cool mission. Crazy at the same time, but really interesting. I'm just trying to imagine the conversation that you would have with your friends around a beer, talking about what you do at work. And it's like, I am working in an Armageddon-style mission together with NASA. And the goal is to crash against an asteroid to try and deflect it, yeah? And then you're taking pictures of all that in the process. I just think it's fantastic. But I'm also thinking about the complexity of the mission itself, and you're packing all this complexity in a CubeSat, right? So can you tell us more about the challenges and the complexity of the whole project, and how you guys probably worked really hard to actually achieve this mission successfully?
Yeah, I would say that in general, what we are seeing in the industry is that smaller platform used to be educational tools or meant to do like in orbit validation of new technology or new products or stuff like that. But then people started to realize that they could be used for doing more complex stuff or for providing services. So as part of this like big picture, what we did in the Licha Cube mission and in the Argo Moon as well was like to push the limits of a CubeSat and to have it work in an environment which is very different from LEO. And that meant that we had many complexities, including the environment, the distance from Earth, communication link, power, communication delay, and stuff like this. And so it was kind of hard to have all these things under control. And but we had this very talented and energetic team. It was super young. The average age of the team was around 29. But then we also, together with the support of the Italian Space Agency and of our friends of NASA, we managed to take all the difficulties, because I can tell you that there were some moments in which it was really, really tough. There were so many issues at the same time that it was sort of overwhelming. But in the end, we managed to overcome all the difficulties. And I think we proved that, I mean, this kind of how to push the limits of these kind of platforms and how to be ambitious when designing a mission with a small spacecraft.
Absolutely. To me, the fact that's really impressive is that the average age of the team working on the mission was around 29. I mean, this is not very typical in the, interplanetary missions setup that I have experienced with, some of the usual organizations working on this mission, such as NASA or ESA. So this is really impressive.
Yeah, but I know that that's one of the keys of the success, because I read an article a few days ago, and the average age of the Manhattan Project was 31, including like the senior leadership. So if you want to do something that is really pushing all the barriers, you want to have a very young team and then a few experienced guys that are leading the team that are crazy enough to do that. And so maybe somehow we managed to do something like that. Obviously in a much smaller scale, but I think that the energy and the passion you can get from a young team is something that is unparalleled by any other approach you can possibly have.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. I am curious, Alessandro, about one thing. So you guys have worked in such a cool missions like these two you've mentioned, also Argo Moon. But what's next for ARGOTEC at the moment? So what are you putting your vision on?
Yeah, we are working on many cool things. So the biggest project we have right now is Iride, so the constellation promoted by the Italian government. We are building a series of spacecraft to do Earth observation, and this is going to be our first mission in LEO, which is something a bit not typical, because we started from deep space and now we are coming back near the Earth. And in this case, what we're doing is being able to manufacture constellations, so satellites in series, which is a new challenge for us. And at the same time, we keep working on science missions. So we are doing a couple of very nice missions together with ESA. One is called Lumion. So basically, we are going to observe the far side of the moon to identify the impacts of meteoroids on the surface of the moon, to see how often this happens and how dangerous it is for surface assets or for astronauts. That's another mission made with a CubeSat in deep space. And then we are also doing a mission related to space weather, which is called the Henon. And basically, in this case, we're going in a very crazy, unexplored orbit that is going to give us a privileged observation point to detect the particles coming from the sun, so to detect solar storms and stuff like this. And also in this case, we're doing this with a very small spacecraft. And the idea is to have in the future an operational service that can provide early warnings in case there is a solar storm. At the same time, we are also opening a new subsidiary in the United States so that we can work on both sides of the ocean. So this is a rather intense period. We are in this scale-up phase, and we are also moving to a new headquarters here near Turin, which is a very cool building designed by a very famous architect that looks like a spaceship, actually. And so over there, we're going to have new labs, the capability of producing satellites in series, new offices, and that's going to be a crucial asset for allowing us to grow even more.
So I can only ask you one question after listening to all of this you're saying is, what's the secret or the secret sauce of Argotec to achieve this success? And I know one of the ingredients is for sure craziness, but what else do you guys, or have you put together to allow for a company to run like this and to run such a cool mission portfolio as you guys have?
Yeah, I will say that one of the fundamental things is that is passion of the people that work here, and then a bit of the willingness of taking risks. That's another key aspect. And yeah, also the will and the vision of our CEO to keep pushing the limit more and more and more. So after we achieve a milestone, he's already looking for the next one, and then the next one, and the next one. So like keeping the bar higher and higher, it's something that I think is allowing us to grow this much.
Yeah, I mean, we're joking a bit about craziness, but actually craziness is no more than actually a funny way of saying a very solid and driving vision for the company, right? You're embarking in these cool projects because you know where you're going, you know where you want to go and where you want to thrive. So that's fantastic. Unfortunately, I have to say we're arriving at the end of our conversation. And I need to ask you a question like I ask every other guest of our podcast, which is, in Argotec, can you please reveal do you guys have any tradition? Do you have any funny anecdote or something that probably is not known, outside of Argotec, but might be funny or might be interesting for the audience to know?
Well, we have a few traditions and many anecdotes. So, for example, in my team, if you want to be accepted, you have to go to the karaoke. That's and I'm really bad at singing, so the sort of tradition. But each team has we have a lot of inside jokes and stuff like this. And as of anecdote, I will say that one of the most exciting days for me was the night of the flyby of LiCube. We were all here because it happened at around 1 a.m. and we got the telemetry at 4 a.m. And so right before the flyby, there was this briefing and I could see all my colleagues and we knew that there were so many things that could go wrong. But I was impressed because they had contingency plans for pretty much everything. And at some point, I was like, it was our first main mission. And when I saw my colleagues doing the debrief, I was like, we're gonna do it. We're gonna make it. So we're gonna take the pictures and do the flyby and survive. And that's one of the best feelings you can possibly have when you reach the point that you trust your colleagues. To the point that you're saying, well, my career is in your hands, and I do trust you.
That's actually very, very exciting to hear. So, Alessandro, thank you very much for being with us today and for answering to all of our questions. It was a pleasure to have you. And
thank you for inviting me.
Hope to see you soon.
See you soon.